Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the PROTEOME Sciences PLC final results investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all of the questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we will notify you by email when these are ready for your review. Before we begin, I would like to submit the following poll, and if you'd give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. I'd now like to hand you over to CEO, Dr. Mariola Songen. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining PROTEOME Sciences Investor Meeting 2022. We will present the final results of our business year 2021 to you. My name is Mariola Songen and I'm the CEO of the company. I cannot spare you the disclaimer. It basically says that the presentation is for information purposes only. It contains forward-looking statements and you should only rely on the published report and accounts, as you probably will already have seen on our website. Now, for those who do not know the company very well, a very short introduction, who we are, what we are doing. So PROTEOME Sciences is a leading provider of contract research services for the identification, validation, and application of protein biomarkers. Sounds complicated, it's very easy. What we do is we receive samples from animals or human beings through our customers, and we find certain proteins, so-called biomarkers for them, which have predictive value when, for example, doing drug development. Now, in the framework of these services, we are also the inventor and owner of TMT. TMT stands for tandem mass tags. These are certain chemical compounds that can label, so make visible proteins. And our exclusive distribution partner for this is Thermo Scientific, very strong partner in the market. Our clients are primarily pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies. However, we are also serving areas like the academic research. Over the years, we have established very effective workflows and the contract services are centered on a certain analytical method, which is called mass spectrometry. So with this very elegant and very efficient method, we can really evaluate the proteome. Now, over the last years, decades, actually, I have to say, the industry and the drug development projects have been mostly interested in genomics, so the genetic information behind a certain disease. That was really in the center of activities during drug development. However, the genome or the genetic information only gives you part of the answer because the individual gene can code for a variety of proteins. Therefore, now today's name of the game is to look into proteomics, so to look into the proteins that are expressed by the individual cell. And actually, the proteome is the language that is used by the cell to interact. We are fully aligned with the drug development process of our clients. So really, usually a very integral part of their development team. We are supporting the clinical trials, but also in vitro diagnostics. And well, in all these activities, we are generating and delivering a huge amount of data. And to interpret those and make sense of these measurements, we have developed proprietary bioinformatics capabilities. Last but not least, we continue to retain our science-led business focus. So that means that we continue to work on science-related matters. And here we have 3 examples: developing new analytical methods and data analysis tools. That is one thing. We are adding new services. We'll come to that, primarily single-cell proteomics, but also develop new reagents and expand the existing range of reagents that we are commercializing already today. A short introduction to the three executives on the call today. So it is myself, Mariola Söhngen. I joined Proteome Sciences as CEO 1.5 years ago. Our Chief Scientific Officer, Ian Pike, is on board for decades, actually. And last but not least, Richard Dennis, our Chief Commercial Officer, joined the company in 2017. We all have very profound experience in the industry for 20 to 30 years, and very happy to present to you today and answer your questions later on. What are our key differentiators, our unique selling points? We are obviously not the only company in the world that is delivering proteomic services. There is quite a group of competitors. Here we have summarized really the key differentiators for you. We are, first of all, an established business, have a very good brand name, so being recognized in the market, and we are revenue and profit generating. Many of our peers are not. Now, next point, very important for our clients, is really the depth of measurements and proteins that we are finding. We see over 8,000 proteins, and you see that, we have mentioned here some other competitors, that the number they can identify is much lower. We have proprietary IP to launch the service to sequence the proteome for a single cell. And single cell proteomics, we'll talk about it later on as well, is, well, I would say an emerging service. It's not completely new, so it's around for a while, but it has so far really centered around single cell genomics. And as I said before, genomics might by today be a little bit old-fashioned because it doesn't give you the whole answer to a certain disease. So you would want to focus on proteomics, but to look into the single cell, that is very important. If you think of a tumor, for example, and you get a specimen to analyze it, this tumor specimen will contain many different cells, like immune system cells, the cancer cells themselves, blood cells, so really a variety of cells. You might be most interested what the cancer cell is really all about. How is it characterized? So to find the cell and really analyze the proteome in it is what we are setting up to provide to our customers. And we hold IP, the patents, and we manufacture TMT. These are the tandem mass tags, which is still a major revenue generator for the group and will continue to be so. Now, this translates to value for our clients, obviously. So what we are offering is the unbiased detection of known and unknown proteins. And this is a key advantage vis-a-vis our competitors. Many or most of our competitors can measure proteins that are known already because they are, for example, using antibodies. But we can also find unknown proteins through our methods. And only our high-resolution mass spectrometry offers this capability to find these really new or novel protein biomarkers. So this translates into greater depth and precision of this protein detection. And we are also working according to high-quality standards. We have an ISO certification and GCLP certification. That is something that is really key for customers that perform clinical drug development and they want to use data for the drug registration in the end. So they have to show that certain quality standards have been fulfilled during this work. And last but not least, drug development is a very, very expensive exercise. So our clients are very interested, of course, to reduce costs. And with a more focused and targeted drug development, better decision-making is possible, and that obviously then translates into cost reduction. Now, coming to the financials, total revenues in 2021 were, and this is all in British pounds, 5.13 million. The biomarker services were 1.9 million of these 5.1. TMT sales and royalties were 3.23, and the costs were 4.72 million. Now we have looked at the adjusted EBITDA, which showed a nice increase versus 2020 to 1.35 million, and the profit after tax was 0.07 million. Also, cash reserves increased as of end of last year to 2.39 million. Financials is one thing. Obviously, there is all the operational and commercial setup behind it and leading to these numbers. So what have we actually done in 2021? Now, on the operational side and the commercial side, the success of the service business is exemplified by the year-on-year growth. And we see increase in orders, which really shows us that there is an increased interest in the proteomics platform. We have seen a record number of contracts last year, and this included a substantial order in the excess of 1 million. Unfortunately, we cannot disclose the name of the company. We are under confidentiality obligations, but that was really a big commercial success to win this client. All in all, we saw a 139% growth in service orders compared to 2020. And this equals to 3.75 million British pounds. We are mainly active in the US and in the EU market. US market was always leading, and now we see that Europe is really nicely catching up and is now on par with the US sales. We continue to see multiple clients reordering services, always for us a key performance indicator to see how the satisfaction of the clients is. And I mean, obviously, when they come in on an initial project and then come back because they have been satisfied and were happy with the data and with the performance and the cooperation, that is always a very reassuring sign for us. And after a particularly strong fourth quarter in 2021, we carried over a significant 2.5 million in service orders into this current year. We maintained a fully operational facility in Frankfurt despite the still ongoing pandemic. So a big thank you really to all our staff for being very diligent in how they were behaving also in their private life and outside of the company. So we really could continue working without interruptions. TMT and TMT Pro revenues remained strong. So that underlines the USP we have with these reagents. We reinvested our profits into new equipment and additional staff. We saw last year that the pull from the market was so huge that proactively we already started last year to invest into new instruments and hired new people. And this is something that continues also this year, of course, primarily also because of the addition of new services like single-cell proteomics. And last year was used to evaluate strategic options, which led to adding our high-profile, high-value service, single-cell proteomics, as I explained earlier. Some key performance indicators. So we have a selection here. The revenues, as I've presented, 5.13 million. Profitability, 0.07 million. Adjusted profitability, 1.35 million. Cash expenditure, net cash inflow was 0.19 million. And percent revenue from services is 37%, namely 1.9 million. Now, strategic positioning and outlook. So where are we going? The transition towards a sustained relaxation of COVID-related restrictions is ongoing, as in the general markets as well. So that is expected to accelerate the business throughout this current year. We manage our ongoing relationships, managed in 2021 and attracted a solid group of new customers. And this is also continuing this year. Obviously, we see very positive signs in our customer group, also in the first 4 months of 2022. I mentioned the high demand for services in the fourth quarter last year, and all in all, we had a record value of orders carried into 2022. So that really supported our decision to strategically invest in new equipment and additional staff. This was to prepare and allow an increase in capacity and revenue generating potential. And it was a very good decision because we really need every and each new employee and every and each new machine that we brought on board. And the value of repeat projects, as mentioned before, a measure for the satisfaction of our clients, is increasing, including the significant order worth over 1 million for the analysis of clinical trial samples. Now, last year, we have performed an internal strategic evaluation process in 2021. Those of you that were on our call last year will recall that we talked about it, that we announced that this internal strategic evaluation process is ongoing. And now what is the result, basically? The result is that we see currently, and I really have to focus this on the current situation, which is this year, is that an organic growth is the best option for Proteome Sciences to develop further. So we concentrate on adding high value, high demand services, and the main stem really is single cell proteomics. I've explained what it is. We are setting this up and will then roll it out and launch it later in the year. So we expect that this will be a major revenue generator once the market has accepted and digested that they can now also get these services from us. And the other part of the organic growth is increasing our USP of the unique selling points of proprietary techs. We are investing in developing innovative reagents, and that is also a project that has started and is ongoing. And again, this hopefully or expectedly will be a revenue driver. We see the substantial commercial opportunity from single-cell proteomics, particularly combined with our TMT Pro. So that is a unique opportunity that we have because TMT Pro is owned by us. We hold the patents. So that gives us an advantage vis-a-vis the market. Now we see that in our client group in academia and pharmaceutical industry, things are more and more returning to on-site work and getting back to normal, which is driving the sales of TMT, obviously. The progress over the last 3 years in Proteome Sciences has created an excellent platform for the further development of the company. And the internal strategic evaluation process saying that, the organic growth in this year is the right way to go, will in the end, and I would expect that this would be by the end of this year, beginning of next year, create a new baseline for the company where we then can move into next steps. In our report and accounts, we are talking about further internationalization of the company. That can mean a lot. I cannot be really much more specific about it, but you could assume that as one of our major markets is the US, that looking into that market and being more active in that market is something that is not too unlikely. The strong order book that we have and hold, our cash position, and the strategic plan are the basis to grow all aspects of our business in this year. And well, as I mentioned before, we have invested and we continue to invest to deliver a step change in growth and revenue. So really adding new instruments on board, adding new, very experienced staff and experts will continue to do so in this year. And this all translates into an increased board confidence of profits and growth in 2022. Now, this concludes our presentation, and we are very happy to take your questions now.
Mariola, that's great. Richard, Ian, Joseph, thank you very much indeed for your presentation this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab that's situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those questions submitted already, I would like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Ian, as you can see, we received a number of questions that were pre-submitted ahead of today's event, as well as a number that have come in throughout today's presentation. Firstly, can I thank all investors for submitting their questions? And Ian, if I may hand back to you just to chair the Q&A session, and if you could run through those questions, and where appropriate to do so, read out the questions and either delegate them to a member of the team or perhaps take a few for yourself, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark, and thanks to all those who've joined us this morning. It's a pleasure to be able to share with you our 2021 results, and I will moderate the Q&A session as Mark's indicated. So whilst there were a few coming in, we have firstly a question about our business model, our USPs. I think, Mariola, you touched on those very nicely. And maybe, Richard, you can come in as the question's more about how do we use our USPs in attracting new customers? What's the market really feeling about proteomics and what they need? And you may need to unmute yourself, Richard.
No, thank you, Ian. I was just reaching for the unmute button. So yes, as we've indicated, there is an increased need in proteomics within the life science, pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical market. And as people begin to pick up that interest, the smaller and medium-sized companies who really don't have the throughput to invest in their own mass spectrometer and a team of mass spectroscopists who are going to run that group, they do look to outsource. And one of the key things we've found in the last few years is that many people don't realize that tandem mass tags, the reagents that Mariola has spoken about, are actually manufactured, and we own the IP on that. So a lot of people go, well, why would we not go to anybody else but the people who make the TMT in the first place, because they have such a significant set of experience in both making those reagents and also using them in their own research. So that's quite a key point for us, and and certainly when we are active in the US market, where there's clearly a challenge, and there's been quite an increased challenge in shipping samples over from the US to Frankfurt, given the pandemic and given the number of clinical samples connected with COVID, which has been shipped around the world in various clinical trials. People, overcome those difficulties because they want to deal with us, as I said, with the experience in TMT. And I think looking forward, as we progress into single cell proteomics, as Mariola has touched on, we will be using our TMT-based technology and patented TMT calibrator approach to really drive that market. And those two significant advantages I've just mentioned will really make us a dominant player, I feel, in that market, where we can, from a single cell at the moment, look at 1,000 to 1,200 proteins. So that, puts us in the leading set of providers who will be able to offer that. And I think with that penetration into that marketplace, we'll be talking to customers who at the moment we're not necessarily are talking to. So, in the immuno-oncology market, there's not a massive driver to look at protein biomarkers. But I think when people begin to look at a tumor and dissect the various cells that make up that tumor, with using our single cell proteomics, it will give us an obvious advantage to look elsewhere in that organization to see where else we can position our services as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Richard. And I might add to that that a lot of our customer base likes us because we do really sort of complex and sophisticated experiments that match their needs. So we're not just a handle turning service, so you don't just send us samples and get data back. We work very closely. We become quite integrated with many of our clients' drug development teams to help them understand the benefits of our technology and what the right application area is. And the customers who keep coming back strongly value that our contributions to their research. And that's what really differentiates us substantially in the marketplace there. So it's a very sort of encouraging time in the market as a whole. There is much more proteomics being done, but the higher value, more challenging projects, there aren't many places that can do that, and we're certainly at the forefront of people's minds when they have those types of projects, as well as we do have some customers who just want to send us routine samples, and that's fine too, but the added value we bring through our experience is what people really value. We have a sort of follow-up question to that, and I'll feed that into a couple of the other questions that have come in before the meeting. So the follow-up question is, what do we believe is the biggest barrier to growth in the near term? And also we have questions about broadening out our services with adding other omics beyond proteins, and maybe some data science or bioinformatics, artificial intelligence activities. So I'll start on that one, and then I'll bring Richard in to comment more on the market pull for those sorts of things. But in terms of greatest barrier to growth, Mario sort of touched on that. It's having the right blend and number of people and equipment platforms. We're addressing that through strategic investment as we see the markets evolving. And the introduction of additional services will certainly help us in that growth story, but you have to be careful to move into areas where there's already quite a good standalone service. So I wouldn't ever see us bringing something like DNA sequencing into the company, because that's very commoditized, very low value, very high throughput. But where we can add value is certainly around that informatics space of saying, can we, as the generators of the most complex forms of data around protein expression and post-translational changes of proteins, can we add more value by bringing in genomics data that other people have generated and do the bioinformatics piece, the artificial intelligence, and that's certainly things we are developing internally, and we're working with a number of partners in both in academia and in industry to understand what the perfect system looks like, and also providing some sort of preliminary assessments of the capabilities within that space. So Richard, I don't know if you have any other comments on sort of barriers to growth and new areas we might be bringing in. Obviously we can't talk too much about the new stuff, but you've probably got some market insights that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you, Ian. I think the last 2 years have probably been the most complex in my whole of sales and marketing experience. And clearly it was a pandemic that caused that. Like everybody knows, we were grounded. And, as a commercial team until March 2020, we were particularly active in the US, doing face-to-face customer presentations, scientific conferences with presentations attached, and exhibitions and marketing events at those shows. And obviously, very quickly we found ourselves, all of us, working from home, as did a lot of our clients as well. But we couldn't afford to stop doing anything. In fact, we had to learn new skills given those challenges. And as we said in last year's summary, we were particularly fortunate at that time to have a freezer full of samples, so we could remain at full capacity through the early part of 2020. but that still left the latter part and last year as well. And as you can see, the activities we did, which were largely centered around virtual meetings, still enabled us to grow fairly significantly. But what we were doing in the latter part of 2020, virtual meeting wise, definitely wore off towards the end of 2021. And I think the biggest barrier to short-term growth, although I don't believe it is a barrier, I think we've managed to get over it, is watching the world and seeing how they're getting back to the more traditional ways of meeting sales companies like ourselves, and obviously from our side, clients. So we've had some successful trips into the US. Ian and I went over to California for 2 weeks in February. And although meetings were put forward or put back to later on in the year, sometimes just a week or two before they're due to take place, we found that we could fill those slots up with more one-on-one client-based meetings and presentations. So we came back from there with a rich list of statements of work, etc., that we had to prepare. That was a part of what Ian was referring to in terms of not just doing our routine sysquant type analysis, but more complex projects that required some complex thoughts, etc., to put the proposals together. And we've continued ongoing from there, picking up on additional meetings and customer visits. So I think the challenge is it's still not there, if I'm honest. Meetings are still run with a physical presence, but also a virtual presence for scientists whose organizations are saying you can't travel right now because of the COVID risk. But it is getting easier. And I think that throughout this year, we will go back to the norm, and we will pick up be able to do what we were obviously doing, from 2 years before and beyond.
Thank you, Richard. Excellent. Next, changing gears a little bit, we've had one question this morning and a few submitted prior to the call regarding the stroke biomarkers and the progress with our sub-licensees there. So obviously we can't provide much of an update on their behalf. We have information, we keep in contact with them, but we're restricted by our confidentiality requirements on some of that. I know progress in clinical trials generally has been difficult over the last 2 years because of COVID, regrettably, but progress is being made with the clinical trials with Randox and the development of a different platform using a lateral flow test, which of course everyone's much more familiar with now, and that's being done by Galaxy, and we believe that they will be trying to get into a clinical trial sort of study at some point this year, but we can't really say any more than that, and we will update shareholders and the markets in general when we have more substantive news on the stroke biomarker program, of course. Right, turning to the next question, we have one on this theme that's come in and also quite a few submitted prior, which is about the share price performance. And the comment that's been submitted now is about the company being totally ignored by the investment market, and why, with all this important work going on, are we not seeing that reflected in the share price? It's stated here that the person asking the question is believing that one of the barriers is our significant loan position and a lack of indication of how we will resolve that, and also suggesting that we really need to just sign some big deals with some named pharmaceutical companies. I will ask Mariola to come in on the prospects for the company and the share price and how we view the direction of travel for that, and we may also, Mariola may also then be able to pick up on the specific question regarding the debt position. I would say on the debt position, we are very fortunate that we were able to maintain the company in a fully functioning mode for several years through the provision of loans, and that having those loans held close to the company is also very beneficial in terms of longer term strategizing. But clearly it is an issue that we need to continually review and address, and be assured that we do that. But Mariola, if you can come in.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Ian. Yes, I mean, definitely this is a question that is keeping us busy night and day, really. You know, how and what can we do about the share price? Yes, I think to some extent it is a sign that the company is not really recognized in the market as a significant player. And on the other hand, the balance sheet issues, if you will, is also have some contribution to this effect. Now, that is exactly why we have run the strategic process last year. And with the decision to add now high-profile services, again, single-cell proteomics and new reagents. So to show the market that, yes, what we have done so far, we have done over a couple of years, that is something that we have delivered in an excellent manner. The business has grown, clients have come back, we have attracted new clients, so all good. But we need to show the market that we develop further. And hence we have analyzed what would really make sense for Proteome Sciences to add and to support the organic growth. Now, single-cell proteomics, as I mentioned earlier, is really a service where the market is very much interested in, and the number of players is particularly those that can provide that depth and precision of data is rather very low. And so we see here a significant opportunity for us to gain a market segment that will really significantly contribute to our revenues. So we would expect that once the service has been rolled out and accepted by the market, we will also see this translated into our share price. Not to forget that we will be offering new reagents that will not be that near term compared to single-cell proteomics, but we can talk about it, and obviously once they hit the market, that will be additional contribution to this. So that is our next step, primarily working on it this year. Coming to the debt position, and I can only agree to what Ian said with regards to the debt position. The loans were very important for the company to survive in the last years and really bring the company into a position where it is today, namely that we are not only revenue but also profit generating. Obviously, profits are small, but I mean, this will hopefully improve in the future. So having these loans is an asset. On the other hand, the balance sheet is obviously something that is particularly when we look into the market being critically evaluated. With the next strategic steps, then after we have implemented single-cell proteomics, new reagents, and so on, we will obviously have more degrees of freedom to also work on such issues. It is a debt position that we cannot pay back just by decision, obviously, with the situation the company is in today, but that can be addressed with new strategic steps in the hopefully not too distant future.
Thank you, Mariola. Next question, which was submitted prior to the meeting. In fact, there were 4 or 5 questions on similar topics. Relates to our IP portfolio. and what we're doing to extract value from that. And as I'm sort of primarily responsible for running the IP portfolio, I'll certainly start that discussion, and perhaps Richard and Mariola may have comments. I'll invite them, but we'll see where we go with that. But obviously the company invested a lot in the earlier years in performing research. We were predominantly a research-based company, generating intellectual property around biomarkers and the TMT technology. And certainly we've extracted extremely good value from the TMT intellectual property and the patent families that we have around TMT through our licensing deal with Thermo. We do have our licensing deals around the stroke biomarkers, but yet to generate substantive revenues from those. We still hope that that will be the case. We expect that to be the case. And then we have panels of biomarkers in other areas, predominantly Alzheimer's disease, and a few other bits and pieces along the way. So yes, we are still maintaining those patents that we think have value. As we spent the last few years transitioning from the predominantly research role into a service business, we haven't had the bandwidth to operate across all fronts in terms of licensing and promotion of the IP, that we have maintained a low level of that as we're at scientific conferences and meetings. And importantly, going forwards, we're now starting to see novel approaches to the management of disease, including broader biomarker panels in the Alzheimer's space. We certainly keep a watching brief as to whether we feel anyone bringing new tests into the marketplace will need to look at our IP and consider if they need a license. One has to be very careful what one says when approaching companies, as there is quite a lot of legal constraint about what you can accuse people of before putting yourself in the firing line. So we're very aware of those issues, and we manage our portfolio appropriately. Moving forwards, we do intend to invest a bit more time and effort as we've pretty much completed that transition to a service business. And you've seen that the revenues continue to grow at very strong rates from admittedly quite low levels to start with. But that growth in service business is driven by our sophisticated working with clients to understand their biological questions and design the right experiments for them. That takes time. But the fact that we have a good roster of clients that bring us multiple projects on a rolling basis means some time is now freed up to go and invest in re-evaluating our IP platforms and making sure that we're exploiting them as efficiently as we can do. These things take time, but there is definitely interest still in biomarkers, particularly blood biomarkers for the management of Alzheimer's disease. We have particular patterns around inflammatory markers in Alzheimer's, which are becoming really of quite good interest at the moment as new drug modalities are coming online. So we will always keep a watching brief. We'll try and involve more people in the exploitation activities and also the policing of those other products that might be coming out and may step into our territory. I don't know, Richard or Mariola, if you have any other comments you'd like to add, but I'll pause here to give you the opportunity.
Ian, just from my side, I would say that, from the commercial exploitation of single cell proteomics, and as I mentioned earlier on, that technology normally relies on the use of tandem mass tags, and the patent that we were awarded within the last 18 months or so with TMT calibrator, where we use some cells to trigger the mass spec to be more sensitive for the proteins that are in those single cells. And I see that as, first of all, giving us a certain degree of exclusivity in doing that type of analysis. And obviously, when other CROs wish to take it up, they will need to, view our patent position in that area. So there'll be obviously a potential for a licensing deal that may take place between us and that third-party CRO. Obviously, we need to see how, first of all, the technology develops and the market afterwards. But there would be some possibility of some licensing type growth in that area, I would assume.
Absolutely.
No comments from my side, Ian.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both. We have one last question sitting from the attendees today. If anyone else has another burning question, please don't forget to put it into the Q&A tab. It's very easy. You just put your cursor in the box and type your question in. We have one question around new reagents and how they relate to our ongoing contracts with Thermo. You won't be surprised that I can't disclose anything around that, and we will manage the exploitation of those tags to the best benefit of the company and its shareholders when we have them available. And I'm afraid we can't give any more detail than that at this stage. Again, we will keep shareholders and the markets updated as and when we have more substantive news on the new tags. So with no further questions coming in, and we are getting close to our allotted time, there is one further question that we always get asked. I described it as our perennial question. I will throw it over to Mariola, but it's the inevitable, when do we expect to start paying dividends? And Mariola, I think you can provide the appropriate response to that one.
Yes. No, I completely understand that question, and it must be asked. So it's very clear that we are happy to answer that question. Now, it is when you look at our revenue and profit situation, obviously we are earning money, but at that stage, and believe me, we are discussing the dividend question regularly in the board. We have, as a board, we had to decide that the inflows have to be used in further strategic investments. So instruments, machinery, adding new staff to really prepare the business for the next steps. If we would pay a dividend right now, first of all, it could be only a very small one, and second, it would really dilute the effect to grow the business further. We could not use our own funds to support further investments, and would need to go out to the market for fundraising, which at this stage, where the share price is, would be probably not very well taken up by the market. Plus, it would have a huge dilutive effect. So at that stage, unfortunately, paying out a dividend will not be possible.
Thanks, Mario. No, absolutely. We do consider it regularly at board. We do consider what's best for shareholders in terms of use of the funds available. And at the moment, that balance is heavily skewed to investing in the talent pool and the equipment platforms that we can deliver better and greater volume of services, which will grow our revenues to the point at some time in the future where we can certainly justify paying out dividends, but we will again keep you all informed as that situation develops. I have one last question that's come in. We'll close on this one. It's about the tryptophan assay and what we're doing with that. I kind of refer back to my answer on extracting value from the IP somewhat here, but tryptophan's a slightly different case in that we have been over the last 4 years or so engaged in a relatively sizable research consortium with academic and clinical partners in Germany, and that's been looking at the application of the tryptophan assay in the context of patient stratification for ovarian cancer, amongst other things. We have recently had a paper come out on the earlier data we have for glioblastoma. But the most interesting thing is that with a new mass spec platform having been installed the back end of last year, and some other developments in the space around metabolite measurement, and tryptophan is a small metabolite and we measure that and several of its process biological forms. We're certainly looking at moving that across from the old platform onto a new platform, which will give us better throughput and potentially better sensitivity as well. So we do think that's important, and particularly in the immuno-oncology space, there's an opening awareness that tryptophan metabolism might be an important thing to measure there. We currently only see this as being something we would do on a mass spectrometer in-house. The reagents themselves are somewhat difficult to manufacture at scale, and that gives us a unique edge in being able to provide that service, of course. And we can actually do this with an absolute measurement of an amount per volume of blood, which is very difficult by any of the other historical methods for measuring tryptophan, and most of the metabolites can't be measured by those other methodologies. So yes, again, tryptophan is something that's very much on our radar. It's an area that we are actively working with at the moment, and we will provide more updates as we get closer to that sort of market readiness and bring it fully out into the marketplace. So with that, there are no further questions come in. We are reaching our hard stop time. I will thank everyone for their attendance again. We very much value the interest you show in the company. We very much appreciate your support, many of you for a very long time, at least as long as I've been with the company. And we do look forward to our AGM in the coming month, and keeping shareholders engaged through meetings like this when it's appropriate to hold them. I will close out and offer Richard and then Mario the opportunity for any closing comments to those attending the call today.
Ian, if I may, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to address all of those questions that came through from investors this morning. And of course, if there are any further questions submitted today, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll publish all those responses where it's appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform, and you'll be notified by email when these are ready for your review. Mariola, perhaps before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, is it possible I could just ask you for a few closing comments just to wrap up with? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, first of all, let me thank you all that you took the time to listen to our presentation, that you submitted your questions. We enjoyed this event very much, and we hope that you can take results out of this conversation, and we were able to give you some more insight and information about what we are doing and where we are heading. So thank you very much for your participation in Proteome Sciences Investor Meeting 2022. We look very much forward to be in touch with you again. Goodbye.
That's great. Mariola, Richard, Ian, Joseph, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to update investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, and I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Proteome Sciences PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good morning to you all.